That handsome brood.
Did you run into a lot of people like that throughout your career? I mean, the champagne taste beer money guys.
Not a lot. I had a regular nucleus of people that worked for us around here, and they could all be trusted. I mean, they proved it. There's still people that work for us 45 years. Good Kurt.
Yeah.
Been around probably 42 years, I think. And if you can get enough of those kind of guys, the other ones seem to fall off on their own because of the lack of work or if their lack of professionalism. That we would try to give somebody some work, and then we'd find out that they weren't worthy of keeping around, and we'd get rid of them. But I would say 80% of the guys that still do work with us have been around for years and years.
That's pretty amazing, considering
it actually is, and I could tout about it all day long, I guess, but it would be bragging. But I think that if you ask any one of them, even to this day, why they would want to stick with us or me, because my theory was that we were all going to make money, but none of us were going to get rich quick. And I was supposed to be the one that supplied the business with very little ups and downs, and that's what I did. When I saw that we had nothing else to do going on or coming up, I'd build an 8-family for myself, and that way they'd have enough work to keep going. And then I said, I'll supply the hamburger and you buy the shrimp, and just keep that in mind whenever you give me bids. I had a plumber who was a very good guy, and we were building the same building over and over and over, and his number was like 80,000. One day he came to me and said, "Ken, we need to get more money." I said, "Well, how much are we talking?" He said, $10,000. I said, "You're going to raise my price to 90,000. "Yes, I have to." I said, "Okay, just hold on. I'll get back to you in a week." Well, I went out and got another price for, instead of 80,000, it was 75. I said, "What do you want to do now?" He said, "Will you give me back my 80?" I said, "I shouldn't, but I will." Because I'd known the guy for decades, and I said, "But don't do that. Don't screw around with these numbers. And just remember, I'm not getting rich off of them either. I'm keeping them busy, or keeping everyone busy, including myself. But you had one thing going for you that you didn't have some other places." I said, "You always knew that when I gave you a check, it was going to be good." And that's very, very unusual.
In the business?
It's terrible. Terrible. They always say that the only truism you can find out about builders is that they got a Cadillac and a wheelbarrow and a line of BS and no money. And so I shouldn't be incriminating my fellow men from the past. We stopped building single families after 14 years. And I was never so glad in all my life. I mean, I hated it, just hated it, because the professionalism wasn't there at all. There was probably 5 or 10 what you'd call good builders. And some of those are still around today, not many of them.
Why do you think that is? Or was?
I think one of the problems is what they call checkbook spending. If you build a house for $100,000 and you make a draw, which is how you get paid in the industry, when you do accomplish a certain degree of work, you get paid for that work. And if you make a draw for $30,000 and you owe 29, you're only going to have 1,000 left for your own overhead, your whatever you got to pay, gas and insurance and vehicles and everything. So if you only have 1,000 for yourself, you're never going to be able to pay $5,000 worth of expenses. And so they'd pay the expenses and they wouldn't pay the vendors. And so it just became a perpetual whirl of crap. And it still goes on to this day. I mean, I don't know if Ryan wants me to divulge some of his stuff, but he's got one right now in Florida where they are holding back $300,000. And it's because the guy started divvying that out to other people instead of giving it to the right people. $300,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of who's getting paid and when, and not to mention out of the draws, the guys could be paying themselves before they pay anybody else.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's so difficult. It probably bears down on how you're raised. If you were raised to be a little slanted, what are you going to care? If you were raised to be honest, then you have to be. And sometimes it hurts to be honest, and it hurts your own pocketbook, but you got to take care of these guys because they're the ones that keep you busy.
Right. One of the you kind of mentioned it before, but one of the phrases that always stuck in my head hearing you say was when you worked with all your guys, you're going to provide the hamburgers and hot dogs for the rest of their lives as long as they want to work. But if you're looking for lobster and shrimp,
Right.
You're in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I was only supposed to be providing the hamburger partially.
Yeah.
If I was their total workload, it wouldn't have worked. They wouldn't have been able to stay alive either, because the hamburger was probably 20 or 40% of what they needed, but they would go out and work for other people on a different basis, and because I was steady and the other ones weren't, they could charge the other ones more.
Interesting. That has always stuck with me. Most people, you think nowadays, hear something like that, and they probably just think, I don't want hamburger.
Yeah, well, that's true. And some of them moved on, but it was far and few and in between. I mean, it was amazing. It was a great ride.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Good Kurt, and for the people that don't know, one of the great things about Ken is even before the whole Trump time, Ken has like nicknames for all these people around the area. So there's Good Kurt, there's Bad This, I mean, there's so many of them. It's pretty funny. But tell us about Good Kurt. How did Good Kurt come into the fold? What did he do? What does he do now? Who is he to you?
He is just a contractor that's quite a good friend. He's in the carpentry business. They do finished carpentry and rough carpentry all over the metro area. And he and his partner from high school, his name is Mike, the two of them been in partnership for 40 years. And not that I've never seen either one of them ever raise their voice at anybody.
That's amazing.
Especially themselves. What Mike would do, he knew he was going to do, and what Kurt would do, he would do what he had to do to keep the flow of he was more like in the business part, bidding and so on. And Mike was the guy with the hammer in hand, and he just loved it. He hated paperwork. Hated it.
Mike did.
Yep. I'm not sure that Good Kurt liked it anymore, but he knew that was part of the function of what they had to do. And it's a perfect example of honesty and integrity. I mean, those guys are just amazing. And and now it's been taken over by one of the guy's son and one of the other guy's son-in-law, and now they're running the business. And Good Kurt and Mike went into kind of a mild retirement. They're still keeping up with things and watching over it because it's only been like a year.
And these guys are nearly neighbors to you, too.
Yep.
Well,
I
Kurt at least, not Mike, right?
Yeah. Mike only lives about a mile away.
Oh, okay.
But I sold the land to Good Kurt so he could build a house for his family. And then I didn't sell him the other second parcel. His son lives about a half mile down the road. And there was another parcel came up that now his daughter's building on. And so it'll be the whole family.
Yeah, it's just a whole commune up and down the road, basically.
We call it inbreeding. Well, it's the same thing with our daughter. She only lives about 100 yards away.
Yeah, for those that don't know. Right. Yeah, I mean, Ken lives right next to his daughter, a stone's throw away.
Yep.
And then my wife, which is also Ken's daughter, we don't live a stone throw. We live 5 miles down the road, but still, we're pretty close. And then one of the businesses that we operate is right across the street from Ken's house. So
right.
There's a lot going on all on one road out here in the little town in Wisconsin.
Exactly.
But no, that's great. Are there any other, really notable people that you met along the way that you have some good stories about or want to say some things about?
One that sticks out is my attorney, who's a couple of years older than I am, and we just kind of grew up in the business together. And sometimes I get mad as hell at him because I'd be ready to fight for something, and he'd be like, "Hey, you know what happens? You're going to spend $50,000 and get back 20." He said, "Suck it up and get over it and get out with it." And I can't think of anything where we ever sued anybody.
That was going to be one of my questions. Like, how many lawsuits have you been involved in this whole time?
Minimal, absolutely minimal. I mean, probably the biggest one that was involving me and a whole bunch of other people was there was an 8-inch water pipe that broke in one of the buildings in downtown Waukesha. And before anybody knew it, I mean, it froze and then split open. We emptied an entire water tower with 220,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
It was terrible.
Where did it empty into?
The sewer
Oh,
just went down the drain.
yeah.
And it was another situation where everybody joined together. It was the most phenomenal thing you ever wanted to see. It started at 7:30 in the morning, and it was 40 degrees, and the weather forecast was by 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, it was going to be down to 15. So we couldn't leave this water just sit. So we got in several pumps, pumped it out. They pulled all the cars out with tow trucks. There was 22 cars down in the basement, and they all got wet. The only thing they saved was a boat because it floated. And they replaced took some pictures. The electric company, as it turns out, it was the blame. They hit the 8-inch pipe with their bucket when they were installing the guys were installing the sewer and the other guys were installing the electric, and they nicked it. It took years for that thing to blow.
Was that right?
It was only because of the cold penetrated down into the frost went deeper that year, probably than the previous 6 or 8 years, and it just blew. But that's another example. He said, "You're going to fight this thing. It's going to spend years." And he said, "I just suggest you settle. My insurance company paid all it out."
Right.
So that was one of the examples. That was probably the biggest number game that I was ever involved with.
Yeah, it's almost unheard of nowadays for somebody to say they haven't been in many lawsuits.
Yeah.
And have been doing business for 50 years.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. But he still keeps us as a client. He's probably 74 years old, I would guess. I'm not even sure.
You've had a lot of people like that in your career that's really stuck with you, and it seemed like your inner circle, even your architect. Remind me of his name again. I'm sorry.
Bob Williams.
Yeah, that's right. Bob. Tell us about Bob.
Bob was a great guy. Was. He's since deceased. He and I both went to MSOE together. He was a little older than I was, and we have the same degree. His was a bachelor's degree, and mine was an associate. And Bob and he was just a genius. He was unbelievable. He could do engineering in his head that I needed a paper and pencil and a calculator to do. And I would bring him different plans that I wanted to build, and he would do all the penciling work, and then they went to computers after that and do the engineering on it. So I didn't have to scatter myself around by having an engineer in one company and an architect in another. So I would design a lot of these buildings with a cursory design, and he would finish them. And we did that for virtually decades. I can't even tell you how many units, probably well over 1,500 to 2,000, most of which were the same two designs, which made it easy because it didn't take much to get to build the second building the same as the first. And unfortunately, Bob has died now, dead, probably 4 years, I suppose, something like that. And we've never yet been able to replace him.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Just, there's a lot of these people that that you talk about, whether it be Good Kurt, whether it be Bob, whether it be, Jim Milla, who's, an architect for some smaller things right now. Just a lot of people that that do specific jobs or functions, do them really, really well, that have stuck with you for a long time, and then either when they're not working anymore or whatever causes them to be unable to do that, right? You go out into the field and it seems as though those people don't exist anymore,
Yeah.
right?
It's very true.
Why is that? Have you seen some change in the culture, or have you seen some significant change in just how people are that, or even business wise?
Well, I think that if I had to answer, which is purely almost a guess, the culture is one of the things. Let's say Bob or Good Kurt, they've been doing this for 40 and 50 years, and they're happy still making hamburger, and they never want to jump up to be getting more money. If they're happy with what they're making, why get greedy? And that's my theory at least. But nowadays, it's such a me society that nobody wants to start out small. And they all want to start out big and make big money. And it just can't always work that way.
Yeah. What about like corporatism compared to individualism? Has there been a major shift with that, with all the different trades and or professions?
Well, some of them have gotten bigger. I wouldn't say a lot. I mean, it just, we live in a very small city here. I mean, we have 1 million people, but that's still nothing. You can run into some of the same people twice in one day at a different office where you're doing business or different subdivisions. Or, we used to have to go to Madison to get permits, and it would be nothing to run into the same people. And so back in the day, and it's probably still true today, I just am not involved with it. You would hire somebody, and they would kind of weed themselves out. If they fell off with their own income and their own business, you just never heard from them again. And today, the ones that are the older group like myself, a lot of them are dying off.
Right.
And so you lose that mentality of keep it small and keep it all, or start out small and then let it grow. They say that 90% of all businesses how's it go? 90% of all businesses are small businesses, and the other 10% were at one time.
Right.
I can't think of anything, and I'm sure it's out there, Henry Ford maybe, where he started out big to start with. You have to grow it. And if nothing else, for your own mentality and your money.
Right. Do you, with raising kids, do you see a difference in your mindset compared to their mindset with kind of like passing down generational wealth? Have you seen your kids, have you taught your kids to become smart with investments?
Well, I often say recently that the kids or the students are smarter than the teacher because they've kept up with things. They go to different seminars, and I don't know if they read much about things, but there's things that they say where I'll just kind of look at them and think, where'd you get that from? I didn't teach you that. So they've expanded dramatically on their own, and they do things like a perfect example. Back in the day, all the checks from each apartment building, each unit that was rented, would have to come to our office. We'd have to record them and whatever, blah, blah. Now they have, it's 3 initials, ACE,
Oh, ACH.
ACH.
Right.
So now all the checks come in, there's not even a check.
Right.
It's just automatic. So what used to take somebody probably 15 minutes a unit, now there's nothing. Probably takes them 10 seconds if they have to do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one example of where they've streamlined. And I don't even know the initials, but I would never have been able to do that. It just wasn't in the cards.
Yeah. Well, and from my observations, at least with your kids, they all manage money very well, as well as their investments. I mean, none of them are showy. They take after you to that extent. I mean, none of them are showy. None of them are driving around in Bentleys. There's nothing like that. I mean, obviously they live good lives, but your family is just not a showy family by any means, right?
Yeah,
your family / my family.
A lot of that was intentional. I wanted to be like Northwestern Mutual and just be known as a small company and just don't go around bragging because you never know when you're going to run into an idiot who's jealous. There's a lot of jealousy out there. Whereas if you wear shorts and tell them you can't afford the other part of the pants, they probably believe it. But yeah, I'm very happy with them. They turned out, all 3 of them.
Yeah, it turned out really well.
And the other thing I should bring up, the concern I have is with the other 4. The other 4 grandchildren, not just the 4 grandchildren, because they always say that the first generation makes it, the other one either builds it or does damage to it, and the third one will lose it. Well, they're in the third one.
Yeah, it's that. Have you heard that saying where it's how exactly does it go? Hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times make weak men. I think that's how it goes.
Yeah, well,
but it's that 3 generational thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Our kids, which are your grandkids, are definitely given a lot.
Yeah, they're my wife's number 1 project. All 4 of them. See, next day around here looked like it was a party.
Well, I bet even people that are watching this are going to be listening to this. I bet majority are somewhat similar, where like toys and stuff like that these days have just gotten to be so inexpensive and junk, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just throwaway junk that, I mean, we have an upstairs that the whole freaking upstairs is full of toys that might have never been played with.
Yeah, they give them away to the Marines at Christmas time because it's still in the wrapper.
Right. And it's, and I don't really understand that. I mean, I'm probably in the middle, right? I'm 40 years old, where it wasn't like that. If you wanted something for Christmas, you wanted a Nintendo or whatever it might have been.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what you wanted. You thought about it for 9 months or 12 months, and you begged for it.
Yeah.
And now it's like the kids basically get whatever they want almost at any point in time.
Exactly.
We can't even come up with ideas for things for our kids for Christmas, which is just freaking sad.
Yeah, but that's the function of grandparents. Spoil the daylights out of them.
Yeah.
And she does.
And she does. That is definitely true. But hopefully, we got a lot of time to work on those kids. And
Exactly. They're all good. They idle hands are the devil's workshop, and they're moving.
yeah, they definitely are. That's for sure.
From skiing to basketball to volleyball to pickleball and whatever else you can think of.
Isn't it fun going to watch all that stuff every time they play?
I just get the biggest kick out of it. And watching them grow, that's what's not in height or weight, but grow mentally in how they play. Like today was a perfect example. They couldn't have done half of that a year ago.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They're starting to look natural doing it. They're only in third grade,
Yeah.
that group at least. And then the other one, Walker, he was skiing up in Michigan today.
And he's getting pretty good.
He
I mean,
is.
from what I've heard, he's becoming very good.
And I don't want him to become a daredevil, because then daredevils usually end up with broken bones. But he's very subdued, very calculated. He'll never win a race because he's too slow, because he's too calculated. But he might be more aggressive this year than he was last year. I've not seen him this year.
That's like the opposite of his dad, too.
Yeah.
His dad's just like
Runs into
right
the
down
wall.
the hill.
Yeah, how fast can I get to the bottom?
Yeah.
So I can do this again and again and again.
Well, his dad was an Olympic skater, so it makes sense.
Yeah, he probably had the right function.
Yeah, for sure.